This episode is sponsored by Petra Kolb. Hello and welcome to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 53. It's Mailbag Show 2, Technology Troubles and the Science of When. Howdy back, folks, and welcome to this new in-between-isode. It's the second one of the year, and there will be a couple of others coming out in February and in March before Season 4, which will be 12 new episodes running week by week, launches itself at the end of March. So that's going to be what's coming. But in the last show, I trialled a new, what I was calling an off-the-cuff style format, effectively an unscripted format. And I talked about a number of things that had really just been loosely on my mind. And I did it as a bit of an experiment. And I've been wondering, did I get away with it? But because I've been off social media during January, and I still am as this launches, this will launch with buffered tweets and Facebook posts and stuff like that to say it's here, but I will not be online to read what is getting said about it. So hopefully I'll get away with it, and hopefully I got away with the one I did a couple of weeks ago. I'll find out quite soon how it's all going, because at the start of February I will be back online and back on the social media, although hopefully to a lesser extent than I was previously, because towards the end of Season 3 I just seem to be forever promoting the show, researching it or recording it. I really don't want to revisit that kind of state of mind again. It was quite overwhelming on a number of levels. But today we're looking at another mailbag show, and I last did a show like this in Season 3, and I found out then that the questions from listeners were actually so involved and difficult to answer that I really couldn't fit them all into that show. And in the end, I booted about half of those questions into this in-between-isode. And I'm sorry, I really am sorry if you've had to wait longer than expected for an answer to your question, but with Mailbag Show 1 running at nearly 50 minutes, something really just had to give. Without further ado then today, let me just fire straight into those questions. And today's first question is from one of my very regular listeners. It's James, who is based in the UK, and it's one for the mailbag, he writes, and it's about filmmaking. He says, I have limited time, 2 to 3 hours per night, if that, and need a system set up where I can be in the edit within 5 minutes, not spending 2 to 3 hours messing about with system and software. Now, whilst the answer may be to get a nice new MacBook Pro and Final Cut Pro X 10, the other thorn is in his side is a limited budget. And he says, I have been creating my work on an iPhone 7 with LumaFusion, and it does the job, but it is obviously limiting. My other option, he says, is a 3-year-old i5 Windows laptop running a copy of Premiere Pro CS6. Well, I know you've kind of solved this one already, James, as although I'm off social networking, I do realise that you did write to me and or follow this up, but I can't right now check back to see what you actually said in your follow-ups. But with your question, I think it's worth answering anyway, as it's possibly one that is on other listeners' minds. So I'm going to give it a go here. And there's two sides to my answer, I think. And the first is a technology conversation. There are a lot of options for desktop editing these days, the big players being Final Cut Pro, Adobe Premiere, and DaVinci Resolve. And I'd mention Avid in here, but the reality is that it's just not used by most content creators. The trouble with these bigger players, though, is twofold. One, with the exception of DaVinci, which has a very powerful free option, they are all very expensive. But the second problem with these editors is that they are quite complex and can take really an age to learn. I mean, it's great in principle to have all the bells and whistles of a full and powerful editor and ancillary software for grading, effects work and sound, but you must ask yourself the question, do I really need all this power? And the answer for most social media content creators is surely, well, not really. And the follow-up question to that might also be, if I buy this software, what exactly would it mean? When you go for these really heavy-duty editors, you might in turn have to then upgrade your hardware, your a laptop like you're mentioning there, you might have to do some major upgrade to the equipment you've got in order that the software can actually run smoothly. Because these softwares are so powerful that they really do need the hardware to back them up. Otherwise, they can struggle along and they can hang, and all the problems that come with computers that are not quite up to the task. And by the way, my friend Neil swears by another editing software called Edius, and another friend is very much sold on Sony Vegas. And these aren't quite as expensive, but might still have a reasonably steep learning curve. But they I think, should be mentioned in this kind of conversation. So what other options do you have? I had a look at one or two cut-down editing packages myself, and as I did so, I actually remembered there were a lot more of these simpler options than I had previously thought, and they're actually pretty good. I first actually tried a cut-down editor for content creators, which is called ACDC. That's ACDC, as in Lookabout, aka Sierra Echo Echo. And I kind of liked it, to be honest. It's a very simple but fully functional video editing suite, which also has a few powerful plugins which might be of interest to a social media content creator like yourself. And I really felt that is perhaps who it is aimed at. It's not quite powerful enough for a filmmaker, but if you're just making simple edits, it might be something worth considering. And obviously, I'm not paid to promote this, and I don't really know the program. I just tried it in its trial. It's got a 30-day trial thing, and I tried it for a couple of hours just playing around with it. It seemed to be okay. But you can get it on a lifetime license right now for just $39.95. That's dollars. And as I looked into this, though, I remembered that Apple's iMovie and Premiere Elements, which would work on a PC, are cut-down versions, basically, of the originals, probably give most users exactly what they need on a budget. And I think that it's those two that I would recommend. You mentioned LumaFusion earlier, and although I don't edit on pads or phones myself, I know that many do. And just really for the benefit of the listener, I want to say that LumaFusion has quite a good reputation, but is a Mac-only editing option for iPhones and iPads. And I understand that KineMaster, Kine Master, is the one favoured by Android users who like to edit on their phone or on a tablet. And providing your phone has the power and what you need to edit is relatively simple as these things go, they are both strong contenders for video editing on your phone and are certainly cost effective. You also talked about potentially getting a second-hand but relatively powerful laptop, and to be honest, for not a lot more, if you're sold on the Mac operating system, you could probably pick up a Mac Mini or an iMac or a MacBook Pro, which is a little bit older as well, that might suit your needs for really not a lot more or less the same price. And I personally would prefer a desktop option for editing. That's just the way I've always worked. That said, I jumped from a Mac to a PC in 2012 and would go for a desktop Windows-based PC option if I had the space for it. And if I wasn't already used to using another system, it was a little bit of I wouldn't say it's a steep learning curve, but it's a troubling learning curve moving from Mac to PC. I really liked interacting with the Macs. I liked the stuff. I just couldn't get very much for the money. And the stuff that I was editing, it was feature film and some shorts and stuff like that. I did need to have a system that was just a little bit more powerful than I could afford on the Mac system. I don't want to get in a whole Mac versus PC debate, but the reality for me was that I could get a computer that was maybe 3 or 4 times more powerful for the same money as a Mac if I bought PC. On the topic of spending money on technology, though, I want to add a wee addendum to episode 26, which was called Shoot With What You've Got. And that addendum is this. If I were to redo that show, I'd now call it Start With What You've Got, because what you are going through, James, happens to probably all content creators and maybe all creative people in various different areas as well, as we move forward with our projects and begin to bump our head off of the ceiling of what is and isn't possible on our current equipment and budget. If you ask the question, which I raised before, do I really need this? And the answer is, truthfully, yes. And you're not just saying that to keep up with the Joneses. And if you can actually afford it, then I'd say that you definitely should spend the money you need to get the power you need to make your editing software function properly. I'm facing this myself right now, and I found myself selling a lot of camera gear I used as a filmmaker to enable me to afford to upgrade my own PC to a 2020 standard that will allow easier editing using DaVinci Resolve, which is quite power hungry, and it is though, however, my new chosen editor. On my current system, I can edit 4K, but it just struggles and it's limited. It's things like when I apply a small grade or a small effect or whatever, it really starts to get sluggish and it's a problem. There's a ton of info online on this topic, so I'm going to leave it at that. But the more productivity relevant, perhaps, element of your question is, I think this. I have limited time, 2 to 3 hours per night, if that, and need a system set up where I can be in the edit within 5 minutes and not spending 2 to 3 hours messing about with the system and the software. To really save time, assuming you have a software hardware package that is now working smoothly for you after what I've just said, for the last 5 minutes I've been rambling on, then you really need to begin to plan and systemize your workflow. Once you've sorted out your technology woes, planning and streamlining your workflow should be the major focus for you. Building smart processes to streamline your workflow can make your work easier and the results more reliable, which keeps your head above water and your clients happy. Mark Mason, unquote. I'd spend a bit of time, if I were you, thinking about exactly what is involved in your videos, James, because if you look at where you are now and how you like to do things and write down every step of what is involved, you will be able to see how it can be streamlined, organised and simplified. And I'd also build a simple library system on your computer or your phone if you remain on a pad or a phone, but in your editor where you can easily get the same elements or assets from the last video which you made and reuse them in the next. If you've already edited an intro, just re-import it for the next project. If you already got approved music or decided on a typeface, or you've got a logo you've had made, or got transitions you really like, then build a database with them in it where you can always go to quickly find and reuse those elements. It might also be worth, I've not got a note about this, but it might also be worth doing a checklist of things that you do to ensure that the project, when it arrives at its final destination, all edited and all that, is complete. And it might just be worth doing a little kind of point-by-point checklist as you're going through it, and it'll quickly stick into your mind. You are covering all the bases as you do your edits. If you're importing footage that it goes to specific folders, then you look to the next one, you set up a new project, you title it, you save it to a specific folder. You can write all this down as a checklist, and it might be worth doing. Systemizing like that, writing it down and letting it become a natural thing for you will make you much faster and more efficient. And once you've done all of this, then it will leave you the most possible time you could have to work on the creative elements of your content, the actual editing, etc. And one last thing I'll say on this is that when I did my best year yet strategy this year, I decided on my major focus for the year, and it was this: learn and practice now to be faster and more efficient later. I'll say that again. Learn and practice now to be faster and more efficient later. And that's the final point I'd like to make here. And of course, this counts for any endeavour that you might go into. The time you spend on learning and being proactive now will make things all that much easier, quicker, and more efficient later, when whatever project you're working on might become time sensitive or whatever. Next week, I've got 3 days earmarked for me to sit down and do a course on DaVinci Resolve. And I'm blitzing the learning of that software over a few days so that I really don't have to potter and struggle with it later on. It's maybe something you should consider doing yourself with whatever software and hardware setup you end up working with. I hope that's answered your question. The second question that I have to answer today should be quite an easy one to deal with. It's from Anne, who's one of my Instagram followers, and she pointed out to me recently on Instagram that some of this show's episodes appeared to have been deleted from Apple Podcasts. And if you think that episodes are missing, don't panic. The chances are that the Apple Podcasts app or other apps that you might find on Android or whatever have automatically archived episodes that you've already listened to. They are still there though, and all episodes I can guarantee you that I have released are still up, but you might have to get into your app and find the ones that have been automatically archived. The reason I have an official website is so that if something catastrophic ever happened, like the show was banned for some infraction, real or imaginary, on Apple Podcasts, that it would still be accessible there and, of course, on my media host as well. And there's another Instagram follower of mine, a friend of mine, Jordan, asked, when will I be putting the show up on YouTube? And I know you, Jordan, and the bigger question here is perhaps, when are you going to learn to listen to podcasts on an app like everyone else? But anyway, your point is taken, and rest assured I am definitely planning to move the show's content onto YouTube at some point. If it were easy, though, I'd already have done it. But after some time looking into it, I have come to the conclusion that it really isn't very easy at all. Starting a successful YouTube channel, and I use the word successful quite deliberately there, a channel where people actually watch and listen to the content, requires a skill set and understanding of YouTube, which as yet I really don't have. I mean, I'm looking into it and I'm beginning to learn about it all, but I'm just not there yet. Just making and promoting this podcast simply as a podcast is very time-consuming as it is. So to add to that the necessity of converting each episode, which has already been released, as well as the new ones that are coming out, to video would mean an output of time far greater than what I have available. I kind of think that each episode would also have to have a waveform generated for it in its video form, and would probably require me to do a piece to camera specifically relevant to that episode to promote each and every episode, just to get people interested enough to listen to a show which is an intrinsically audio show, not a visual piece. And I think to engage people in actually listening to it and wanting to listen on, as there is nothing moving on screen, or maybe I could put pictures of mountains and stuff up, I don't know. But it's more involved than just chucking up audio files onto YouTube with a picture of me going, this show's great. I think it needs to have a little bit more effort put into it, otherwise it would fail. I'd also have to generate keywords and SEO, and the website would have to have some more information on it as well, and social media updates as well, as a whole heap of new content in video format. And that's not something I'm averse to, and it's possibly something I can delegate a lot of, but in my current situation I know that I simply don't have the time to tackle it, or the money to pay someone to do these conversions or work with me to make it all happen. But let me just finish this answer by stating that I am working now to get the skills and the knowledge to not only produce high quality video for the show quickly and efficiently, but to promote and market that content. As I said in the last episode, in my, I think, fairly ham-fisted baker analogy, it's not enough for me anymore to just produce content and shove it out there and hope that someone might notice it. For me, it has to be presented in a way that attracts and keeps an audience who will want to consume it. Marketing the content is therefore just as important to me as creating the content in the first place. And when that happens, of course, the YouTube audience could or should, or I hope would, cross-pollinate to this podcast and vice versa. Really, the only reason I thought about doing anything on YouTube at all is to try and get people to listen to this podcast. But as I've looked into it, I've realised, hold on here, if I'm going to go to this effort and it's going to actually work, I need to build an audience on YouTube that would want to go and consume the content elsewhere. I certainly feel that the process is a worthwhile endeavour, and that process too might also be interesting to listeners if it's not altogether off topic. I know there are great podcasters and actually great YouTube creators out there who talk about how they get their product online and how they use YouTube, etc. And I don't really want the show to become that, but if it's interesting and there's some lessons to be learned there, it might actually feed into the show itself. So the next question up is from Ray, who is a screenwriter from the UK, and I must add he is a very, very good one at that. And Ray was actually the first person, I think, to send a question, so I definitely feel bad about this one, about not including it in the last Mailbag show, but in the end, I just didn't have the answers for you either, and I kind of put it off till now. Hopefully so that my mind could get a bit of a handle on what you were asking, because to be fair, you managed to ask 15 questions in all, Ray, and I'm not entirely sure that you didn't answer some of them yourself somewhere along the way, but I'm going to give it a try. And your questions, which I'll reply to in batches incidentally, are as follows. When do you know the idea is ready to execute? I've got a great many ideas, all with some vague potential, but when and how do you know which idea is ready to go and which has to sit on the shelf maturing a little longer? Do you write the one you're most excited by just because it's the shiniest object in the room this week, then run around when you find it's not developed enough yet? Do you batter that one script you've been working on forever until it finally submits to your will and miraculously works, or do you move on to other stuff until genuine inspiration hits? Or do you play a game of inches, nudging every idea along until they either cross the line or fall by the wayside in a sort of natural selection style? When do you know that the single line you wrote on the back of the electricity bill has run around inside your skull long enough and is now ready to be thrashed into a treatment? When do you know that treatment has gone as far as it can and it's time to move on to your script? When do you know that script is as good as it's going to get and it's finally time to start shooting? And when do you know when the edit's as good as it can be and it's finally time to lock? Essentially, when do you pull the trigger and when do you hold fire and give it another minute or a month in the laboratory? Do you really need to have trusted collaborators to sound stuff out with and be your fresh eyes? Should we wait for that innate feeling when we just know something's as good as it can be and then tweak it again next week when we think of yet another way to make it better? Or do we never really know and just have to navigate as best we can? And I want to interject here a bit. I think all of those things you have to do. And I don't want to lead with this predictable answer of you just know. But I think it's a good opener for this, and I believe it's where you are heading when you're writing these statement come questions down. As we know all too well, there is no blueprint for those of us that work in the creative arts, that build worlds from scratch and hope that they will be understood, enjoyed and accepted by others who perhaps haven't got our vision. We just have to do the best we can. Having people read your work when it's reached a point when you'd like feedback is definitely a good thing, if you can find truly talented people that you trust, that is. And when you remind yourself always that you can accept or reject their input. There's an American journalist called Cecelie Berry who said, self-assurance doesn't come from looking perfect and having a great title, but from accepting yourself with all your mistakes and eccentricities. And I think that's a good description of the fear of failure that can swing by as we make decisions about our own lives and work. But there's a quote from Peter Drucker too that comes to mind, and he said, whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision, unquote. So if you accept that mistakes will sometimes occur and you decide not to beat yourself up about them when they happen, then you can more easily move forward with courage. That courage will eventually lead to greatness if you have the strength of heart to make those difficult decisions and trust in your instincts and in your own worth as a writer or creator. Your questions continued, but you interjected this useful thought here. As a professional, you said, deadlines clearly help. It's collaboration too. On a film, everyone has their department and task, and we all cede control to the next person in line. And I agree with that. But then you continued with a few more questions. You said, at the development stage, the thought to mouth, pen to paper stage, as a professional whose livelihood often depends on timing, knowing exactly when to give a bright idea oxygen and pitch it, or knowing exactly when something is polished enough to present it to the waiting world and try to exploit and monetize it. And I'd say here that you should trust your experience. And if you have a feel for what is going in the outside world and in the professional world and for the company or individual that you might be pitching to, then you will know what the right project is and which is the one that still needs some time, I think. Barbara Kingsolver, who's an author, said, "Don't try to figure out what other people want to hear from you. Figure out what you have to say. That's the one and only thing you have to offer." Unquote. So I'd add that it is your unique voice that has the real value, that it's not just your individual projects that matter. What people buy into when they're looking at your work is they're buying into you as much as they are into the specific project that you might be pitching. And I don't think you should lose sight of that. Your unique voice, your intellect, your ability, your experience, your successes are just as important as the words you write on the page and the individual projects and treatments that you work up. You continue with, "How do we reconcile ourselves with the onslaught of opinion our work will inevitably face and the fact that we'll sometimes get it wrong?" And maybe my real question is, how do we deal with the rejection our hyper-competitive industry will inevitably throw up? And you finish with, "Don't take it personally, I suppose, possibly not a topic for the show, but seeing as you asked." Yes, thanks for this series of questions, Ray. Really, oh my God, they're so difficult to answer. And actually, I'm not going to answer these last few ones because I'm tackling the topic of rejection in a full Season 4 show, which is likely going to be called Rejection and Resilience, I think. But for now, let me just say that the key to life is resilience. We will always be knocked down. It's the getting up that counts. And I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but belief in yourself and your abilities and getting back up when we get hit. I've had the bad reviews as well. I've had the reviews which are complete nonsense. I read one recently for my feature, Fast Romance, that said that we'd borrowed all the equipment from a TV show and that we all worked in the TV industry and we were just making cheap TV and we were trying to make money. It was a complete, utter load of bullshit. Whoever wrote the review just had an axe to grind and decided that my film deserved this, 1-star review because we'd cynically made a film with none of our own money, none of our own passion, none of our own effort, and we're just cynically wanting us to get money from paying customers. It couldn't have been further from the truth. It really, really annoyed me. Anyway, eventually you have to get over it, as I'm sure you have, as I'm sure many listeners have as well. And I'm going to be tackling that in Season 4. I don't know if I've gone totally off the rails there, but I just wanted to make that point. But I hope I've said enough here, Ray, to help you in some small way, and that others who are listening get something from your observations and perhaps my answers too. And I'm sorry I couldn't go deeper into that last point there, but I will get into it and I will cover it in depth when the time comes, and that'll be definitely happening, definitely 100% in Season 4. Okay, so just moving on one more time. There was another question in here, by the way, which was kind of delicate, and it was associated with funding. And I think I'm also going to do a show on which will answer that question in Season 4 too, in an episode I think might be called, if I can make it happen, Why We Should Not Apply for Funding. So if you've asked a question which is about funding, and you'll know who you are, please bear with me. Hopefully I'll be able to answer it in Season 4. It's a delicate one, and I tried to answer it in here, but I think it's a bigger answer than I'm willing to give time to in this show today. So bear with me. It will come along in Season 4. But let me end today's episode with this one from Diane in the USA, who asks, and I've been asked this a few times, why is your show called Film Pro Productivity? Would it not be better calling it something less specific? So that was a question. And believe me, Diane, I have racked my brain over this title time and time again, before I launched and as I've gone through it. And your question was asked, of course, before I decided to change the name of the show to Film Pro Productivity and Success, which this is the first episode where I've actually put it out there with that title. Hopefully it will go out with a logo which has been amended as well. I've got a design guy amending the previous image and hopefully adding the words and success to it, and it'll come back to me hopefully before this show launches. I, at this point, don't really know, but I'm hoping it'll happen. But anyway, My answer to you is that they say in the world of podcasting that you should niche down as much as possible to find your audience, and that's just what I did. Even now, I suspect that it might still be too broad, but I'm not complaining because people are listening that aren't film pros and they seem to be enjoying it. Although this has maybe been a little bit more filmy, this particular episode, than most are, and certainly perhaps maybe a little bit less productivity-ish as well, but the questions came in, I did have to answer them. The other thing about, making it too broad is that there are really an awful lot of big established shows with celebrity level podcasters which cover productivity for the masses. But for me, I just didn't see one that was tackled specifically for film professionals and creatives. And as I was a film pro, it just seemed appropriate that I tailor the show towards what I know, the people that I interact with, and what I am passionate about, which is filmmaking, theatre, TV, film in itself, design work, and of course, productivity. And these are all things that I know well and can talk about. My hope now is that the addition of the word success, though, will broaden it a bit and it will encompass a new area of interest to the listeners and inform prospective listeners what the show will entail. I've definitely got a problem with people not understanding what productivity is. To me, I knew what productivity was, time management and all these things was productivity, but some people still don't get it. And I think the word success just broadens it enough that people will get what I'm on about. And also the thing about broadening it into success will keep me interested in this show's content, because ever since I did the Law of Success in 16 Lessons mini-series in Season 3, I have become very interested in success and how it can be achieved, I believe, by all of us if we put time and effort into it. And I don't know if I've made the right call, of course, but I've not come up with anything better in the interim. And in the future too, I might broaden it further, but for now, I'll just, I think, focus on producing more content and gaining a listenership that wants to hear what I have to say. I kind of feel that Film Pro Productivity and Success is going to allow that to happen, that new title, but time will tell. So that's it. That's another batch of your questions answered. And oh my God, they were so difficult. And I hope that you found this all very interesting. Please keep these questions coming in, though, as the last episode, and hopefully this one too, was really very, very popular. Please note, though, that questions should be kept as short as possible, preferably under 50 words or maybe under 100, I might let you away with. And they should be emailed to filmproproductivity@gmail.com with the word mailbag in the subject line. Please don't send them by any other means, as it's an absolute devil to track them down when they come in through various different sources. Alternately, though, you could leave questions for this show as a voice SpeakPipe message via the contact page of the website. That's filmproproductivity.com/contact. And it's effectively an online voicemail service. You go onto the contact page, use your phone to leave a message. The message can be up to 90 seconds long. And if you ask the question, I can include the audio in an actual show. So that kind of might be cool. I'll be back online in February and I'll be able to respond to any comments made on social networking at that time. But in the meantime, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do me a favour and screenshot it on your phone and post it on your social media pages with a working link if you can be bothered finding one. And if you can do that, it would be very much appreciated. I really do need your help to promote the show, so if you can just mention it to a few people as well. Since we're at the end of the show, I might as well fire that in. Then if you think it's worthwhile, mention it to a few people. That would be awesome. Now, today's episode was sponsored by my good friend Petra, and it is greatly appreciated. And if you are interested in sponsoring an episode of Season 4 or even one of the in-between episodes before that, please get in touch. Sponsoring an episode costs £25 and that can be paid by PayPal. If you want to just drop me a line, I'll send you the details. These contributions, by the way, will go directly towards promotion and marketing, and they make a big difference to the show's profile. When Season 4 launches this time around, I'll be running various marketing schemes and strategies along with it, and I'll be utilising those funds to hopefully help build the audience. That is, of course, the point of me doing the show, that as many people as possible will be able to listen to it, learn from it, and get an easier, more efficient, effective, and happy life as a result. Now, one other thing that I'm looking for, by the way, is topic researcher writers, and I'm really desperately trying to delegate some of the episode writing for season 4, because I'm doing a show on delegation, and I thought it'd be kind of cool to delegate some of the research for episodes, because then I can talk about how that's worked. And at the moment, I'm not having much luck with people I've been asking to research. It's not really working quite as easily as I thought it was. So I am looking for not quite volunteers. There is a small fee for this assistance, which I will personally pay you. That doesn't come out of the episode sponsors thing. That money is kind of ring-fenced, I think they call it, just for promotion. That goes into one place and that gets spent in one place. But I will be personally paying a pathetically small fee for assistance, which will be in the form of researching and kind of scripting the lesson parts of a standard episode. And I've got various topics and stuff which I'll be offering to people to do that from. If it's of interest to you, then please get in touch again by email at filmproproductivity@gmail.com, this time with the words episode research in the header. I would be interested in hearing from you, although of course I cannot give 200 people the chance to do this. Maybe I can give 1 or 2 people. So if you think you can research an episode and work up a script, get some quotes together and help me put together a show, if that's something that's of interest to you, and I might reach out to a couple of you anyway about this, but if you think that's of interest to you, if you think you can bring value to the show as well, then please drop me a line. So, many thanks for giving me your valuable time today. I know that there are many, many things you could be doing other than this, and I'm sorry for kind of backloading you there with all these kind of effectively calls to action, but I am very, very grateful for your attention today. Let me end now with a great quote that I found from productivity author Les Brown, who I have to be honest, don't know how I missed him. I'd never even heard of before, but I came across him because he wrote a book called The 12 Laws of Success, which I will definitely be looking into. He said, "Too many of us are not living our dreams because we are living our fears. Decide to become fearless. Face the thing you fear the most. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. If you can laugh at it, you can move past it. You have the ability to do more than you have ever hoped, imagined, or dreamed. You have greatness within you." For now, though, take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you can hear right now is Adventures by Ehimitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, which is filmproproductivity.com. And you can follow my personal accounts on Twitter and Instagram at fight_director, or follow the show on Twitter at filmproprodpod, or on Facebook at filmproproductivity. Please continue to support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and please do leave an awesome review, preferably on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or whatever. They're the ones that seem to matter. See you next time.